Welcome, neighbors, to this series we've named Talking with the Doctor. On the surface, it seems a simple thing. You visit the doctor, you tell him or her what's wrong, or what you think is wrong, or at least what is troubling you. He or she listens, nods, makes a few notes on the computer, asks a few questions, and proceeds to tell you what you need to know and what can or will be done to eliminate the problem. Sounds simple and routine, but it isn't. That first presentation of a health problem is very, very important. And there is never enough time for it these days, and all too often, one or both participants in the conversation fail to make the best possible use of that too short time. That is what we hope to discuss and illustrate in this series of episodes, each of which features a healthcare issue or a major medical specialty. We'll talk about the problems of communication in each field. We invite you to join us. This episode of Talking with the Doctor will feature the following presenters.
Dr. Wendy Gross went to Tufts University School of Medicine and completed a residency in anesthesiology at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. She was awarded and completed a 3-year NIH fellowship in cardiac anesthesiology in the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Gross is an attending physician in the Division of Cardiac Anesthesia, an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School, and a vice chair in the Department of Anesthesiology, Perioperative and Pain Medicine at Brigham and Women's.
Nalora Lowe Steele, producer. Lowe is a professor at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. She's a former opera singer, long associated with Sarah Caldwell's Opera Company of Boston, a successful music educator of long experience, and she is recognized as the impresario of excellent musical productions and a television performer as well. Paul Gross is a former, that is to say, a retired academic. He was a professor of biology at MIT and at the University of Rochester, and the Taylor Professor of Biology at University of Virginia, where he was also the provost. And he was, for 10 years, the director of the MBL, the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole.
General anesthesia. This simple basic definition is from Medline Plus, an internet resource from the National Institutes of Health. A safe way to stay asleep and pain-free, together with reasons you might want or need to. Too much pain, breathing troubles, other discomforts, anxiety. All those refer, of course, to surgery or other medical interventions that may be needed to deal with serious illness or injury. But what a long, long history of effort those words stand for. At least 4,000 years of trying to conquer unbearable pain. And in essence, all those attempts failed until, that is, the dawn of success came in the late 18th and 19th centuries. Only then did what today we call surgery become possible. Only when medicine and serious experimental science began to come together was there light. The 17th century growth of chemistry led to the making and study of gases, some of which, such as nitrous oxide, laughing gas, proved to have pain-stopping anesthetic power. Other vaporizing chemicals appeared, including ethers. The rapid growth of physiology, pharmacology, and scientific medicine generally allowed objective research to be done. Anesthesia became an indispensable technique of modern medicine, not only for surgery, but in such new and expanding branches as cardiology, orthopedics, gastroenterology. One breakthrough happened 167 years ago here in Boston. On the top floor of the Bullfinch building at the Massachusetts General Hospital, 16th October 1846, a test or experiment or demonstration took place in the top floor operating theater. The patient was Mr. Gilbert Abbott, who suffered from a tumor of the jaw. There to remove it were noted surgeon John C. Warren and his team. There to do the critical part of the experiment was Boston dentist William T.G. Morton, whose experience with diethyl ether had convinced him that the fumes were a powerful and safe anesthetic. He had learned that they could put a patient safely to sleep, free of all pain for a period determined by the amount of ether inhaled. This photograph here is a daguerreotype made a few days after that momentous experiment, with the original participants in a reenactment. What happened there is history. Using a glass inhaler, here is a reconstructed model of it, containing an ether-soaked sponge. The patient was allowed to inhale the gas. He fell into a deep sleep. The tumor was excised or cut out and repairs completed. When Mr. Abbott awoke, he was asked how he had fared. He reported that he had felt nothing, no pain. Dr. Warren turned to his colleagues and the observers and students. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "this is no humbug." The news spread rapidly worldwide, and the technique became a standard in surgery. One British newspaper described it afterward as the greatest gift ever made to suffering humanity. Today, our visitor is Dr. Wendy Gross of the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston in the Department of Anesthesiology. Wendy, welcome to our program. We're so thrilled to have you. And I have to say at the very beginning, you have taken me to school about anesthesiology and the tremendous importance of the people who do the work.
Yep.
And as I said to you, when we go in for some procedure, you are the people that give us the tender, loving care.
Exactly. That's correct.
So tell us about your field and how you got to be in the field. What does it take to be an anesthesiologist?
So first of all, anesthesiologists are doctors. They're
Yes.
not nurses or any allied health professional.
Right.
We do pre-medical studies like everybody else. We go to medical school. Most of us do a year or two of surgical or medical training first, and then we have a 3-year anesthesiology residency. After that, many people go on to specialize, so they do an additional fellowship
Really?
for 1
Oh.
to 3 years in some particular field.
So we're talking 12 to 15 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. That's one of the biggest things I want to lift up in this whole series is the tremendous amount of time it takes to prepare.
It does,
to
but
do these
like
things.
anything else, if you like it, then it doesn't seem very long at all.
It's okay.
And if you work 16 hours a day in a field that you love, it's not a problem.
Right, right. And if you do, it is a problem.
That's correct.
But absolutely, those of us who have spent our lives in fields that we really love are very fortunate in that way.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are days when your father cannot get hold of you easily because you're on call all the time.
Well, anesthesiology is sort of a funny field in the sense that you don't get to schedule your day. You are in
Right.
the operating room and you're in a case, and
Yes.
when we do cases, we are there the whole time with the patient. There is never a time when you're undergoing a procedure and an anesthesiologist is doing the case that you're by yourself, and that's very important to know. We are always there.
And I'm
always.
not sure that any of us really knew that.
Yeah.
Because why? Because we're not looking at you.
Well, I think
And-
people think about having surgery or having a procedure in terms of the actual procedure itself.
Yes.
But just like an opera or a play, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So when you have a procedure, there are a lot of monitoring. There are a lot of monitoring devices that are put on you, and the anesthesiologist is actively involved in watching that stuff all the time as the surgery takes place. So it's impossible for you to undergo surgery without an anesthesiologist in attendance.
There,
And
yes.
so we are always present, and we collaborate with the surgeon as the whole thing goes
Right.
forward.
One other thing I wanted to say, and I may be jumping in our script here, but what I was so amazed to discover is that you have to know everything about that patient that you can possibly find out,
Yeah. Well,
because you are working with the entire body.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, that does bring up the matter of communication. I might as well say that the
Right.
purpose of these episodes of ours, the primary purpose is to inform the audience about what the doctor really needs to know, and to encourage patients to provide the information by word of mouth and by notes and so on. So for anesthesiology, the needs, your needs, are probably different from those of the psychiatrist, for example, or the gastroenterologist.
Sometimes not.
Yes. I hesitated to say that, but still, what do you need to know?
So every time you have a procedure or a surgery that involves an anesthesiologist, you will have to have a preoperative evaluation of some kind. We cannot anesthetize somebody who hasn't been evaluated. That evaluation includes everything about you, from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, from your neurological and psychiatric status to your cardiac status, your pulmonary status, any GI problems that you have. All of these things are important foci of information that we need in order to develop an anesthetic plan that's right for you and right for the procedure that you're undergoing.
It didn't mention feet.
Feet can be important. If we have to put an IV in your toe, sometimes your feet are important. But the thing is that sometimes patients come for a pre-op evaluation and they're having a cardiac procedure, or they're having their gallbladder removed. And we ask them all kinds of questions about other things, because we basically monitor your entire physiology while you're having your surgery done. So we need to know if you have cardiac problems, if you have lung problems. We also ask things that people think could be irrelevant. We ask you about your drinking habits. We ask you about your smoking habits, because all of these things can alter your tolerance to drugs.
Indeed.
So since there are a million ways to skin a cat, we want to put our finger on the right one for you. Also, in addition to your physiological parameters, we need to know all about any medicines that you take, and that includes over-the-counter supplements.
Yes.
And people sometimes don't realize that, because vitamins have things in them that can bump up your nervous system activity,
Indeed.
or slow down your gut, or speed it up. So all of these things, all of these systems continue to work while you're in the operating room. And since our responsibility is really for you as a patient before, during, and after the procedure, we want to make all of those transitions as smooth as possible. So the more we know about you, the better tailored your anesthetic will be.
You're
Right.
talking about physiology, about comprehensive physiology of a whole person.
Yeah, and it's our job, unlike the rest of medicine where there is very detailed specialization all through different disciplines, our job is to integrate your physiology together. So when somebody is operating on your gallbladder, your heart will react to it, your lungs will react to it, your gut will react to it, everything reacts to it. So our
course,
job
of
is to put all of it together so that when you're done, you're comfortable and you're as homeostatic as possible, and there aren't any big changes that we have to deal with.
Right. One of the things that I think many of us have not been aware of is that operative word you used, tailored to you. the anesthesia has to be tailored to the specific person.
Yeah, yep. Some people come to us and say, I want to know nothing, I want to be asleep. Some people say, I don't want to go to sleep.
Some people want natural childbirth. I never
Right,
understood
okay.
it, but if they want it,
Well, I think that by and large, we never try to force one anesthetic or another
I
on
see.
somebody. Obviously, if the surgery dictates that one approach is better than the other, we will explain it to you. But you know, ultimately, you have to be happy with the plan, and you need to remember that. You should feel comfortable saying to the anesthesiologist, "What's the plan? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to me? I'm worried about this and this." If you're worried that you're not going to wake up,
yes, that was the
fine.
next question.
I mean,
What do you tell them if they ask you if they're going to wake up?
you know, so many people are worried about that.
Yeah, I can believe it.
And honestly, I have to tell you that among my friends who are anesthesiologists, we don't like the idea that someone else is in control at all. So, and I think that that's a big part of it. People worry that if they're asleep, they won't know what's happening and something bad will happen. And the fact
Right.
is that there are something like 40 million anesthetics delivered in this country every day.
Amazing.
And the mortality rate is minuscule, and actually driving your car is much, much more dangerous than having an
the
anesthetic.
statistics that you told me before are boggling on that.
Yeah.
It makes
yeah.
me think about getting in my car.
Well,
No.
cars are very dangerous. I mean, something like 90 people a day die in car accidents.
Yes.
And something like 400 people a year have problems during surgery, and that's not just the anesthetic. That includes people who come to the OR
Yeah.
very ill.
Isn't that amazing?
So it really,
Right.
I mean, as technology has developed, our monitoring capacity has improved, and obviously surgical tools are much better than they were.
I was interested in you talking about the fact that they can do things that used to be done by surgery non-surgically.
Yeah, so now as the population has aged, gracefully, of course.
Yes.
And as
We know about that.
Yeah, well, me too. And as technology has developed, there has evolved this whole sort of bucket of interventional medical procedures, which can be used to treat problems that were once thought to be surgical problems. So one of the big parts of my practice is actually doing cardiac surgery, and we are actually able to insert and implant new cardiac valves in people through their legs, so that you don't anymore have to have a sternotomy in order to have a new heart valve put in. And because the surgery is so complicated, in the past we would never operate on people in their 80s for that kind of surgery, but now, because there's no incision, a lot of our patients are in their 80s and 90s, and they leave the hospital 2 days after they had the procedure.
That is
So
amazing.
as all of that has evolved, the role of anesthesiologists has expanded. And because people are much more medically complex than they were 20 years ago, because we all live longer,
Right.
the whole discipline has evolved tremendously.
Has changed.
Yeah. a lot.
I think the one of the hardest things for people our age, the age of your father and me, to wrap our heads around is how fast medicine has changed, and the different role that we need to have in relation to the medical people in giving them all of the information they need in order to use the new technologies.
Yeah, I think it's true that medicine has evolved a lot, and that the technology it's worse than cell phones. I mean, every 2 weeks there's a new catheter, a new device, something else that's being done. But the fact is that we are still here for you, and you should not feel like it's too complicated or too above you to ask a question about what's
No.
going to happen and what you need
Any
to think
question
about.
goes.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
important.
Look,
Absolutely.
this brings me back right to what I wanted to ask at the beginning. Your colleagues, the other physicians we talked to, seem to have agreed that it's immensely helpful or even important for a patient, at least in the initial interview, to have a list, even a written list of his or her questions, as well as all the normal information about medications and so on. That is a written set of questions and concerns about the procedure that they've taken the time to think through before getting to see you at that first interview.
Yeah, I think that's really critical because just as in other medical specialties, having the prospect of having surgery is daunting no matter what the surgery is.
Yes.
The prospect of going to an operating room or a procedure suite and letting other people take care of you can be very scary, and a lot of people are in denial about it even though they make plans long in advance of the actual date. And so the fact is that when you get to the week before and you're having your pre-op visit, you may forget the stuff that you really want to ask, or you may be too nervous to actually do it, or you may think it's irrelevant. So honestly, I think it's a very good idea to make a list of the things that concern you and do it before, and then add to it, and then when you get there, if you're too embarrassed, just hand the sheet over.
Yes.
But it's actually, I think, critical because people sometimes forget until the last minute to say, "Oh, I can't breathe out of my nose," or you know, or "Oh, by the way, this and this is an issue," and it's not something that can't be addressed, but you'd like to have the time before to plan it and make sure that everybody's comfortable.
It makes sense for one to do a simple little list of all medications they are on and put it in your billfold.
We actually, a lot of patients come with
Do
that.
they do that?
And I don't think it's a bad idea, even if just for the reason of access if something happens to you and you can't iterate your list. You have it in your wallet.
That's right.
And I think that it's also a good idea to bring somebody with you to your pre-op visit, because usually somebody has to come to pick you up, and it's a good idea for that person to be aware of how
What's going to happen?
you're going to feel afterwards, or what's likely to be your condition when you leave, or what kind of things they should watch for, in addition to what the surgeon will tell them. The anesthetic has effects on its own.
Yes.
So it's very likely that you'll be tired for a few days just from the anesthesia.
That's helpful to know.
Right, so that you
because
don't feel like something bad happened to you.
Exactly.
People forget things. Even young people forget things and can be not quite themselves for up to 3 months after an anesthetic.
Really?
So it's not, and then also older people will sometimes ask, you know, there's dementia in my family, is this going to make it worse? And there's absolutely no evidence for that. There's actually some evidence that anesthetics can be protective to your brain. So it's really not the case that there's going to be some huge decrement after you have anesthesia.
But this is one of those concerns that floats around in a subterranean way.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me that we ought to encourage this way, for example, ought to encourage people who have that concern not to be ashamed of it.
Well, I think, look, there's no reason to have unnecessary surgery, but if you need surgery and you need anesthesia, don't put it off because you think something bad will happen.
Yeah.
That's likely not
Because
the case.
tomorrow you're going to be a day older.
That's true too.
Right.
But really, it's very, very safe.
Yes.
And we are very, very careful, very careful.
Obviously, you have absolutely taken me to school on this whole area of anesthesiology. And we were going to ask you about your promotion to being vice chair of
something,
anesthesia
something.
For interventional medicine.
For interventional.
So, as I was mentioning before, all of these out of OR procedures.
Yes.
For example, there are now many procedures done in an endoscopy lab where you get your colonoscopy.
Right.
That can undertake to treat conditions that used to only be treatable in the OR. We can do so much through scopes that you don't have to go to the operating room at all. But those procedures all require anesthesia. So that the whole realm of anesthesiology has actually broadened to include a great deal of interventional medicine as well as surgery. So it may be that you go to have a procedure outside of the operating room and you don't think of it as a surgery, it's a procedure, but you will still have an anesthesiologist assigned to you. And that should not scare you, that should make you feel good, because somebody will be there.
We are here to make people feel comfortable about having what they need at the correct time. Because certainly, Wendy, I would not want to go through any of these things we've talked about without anesthesia.
Right, right.
We tend to forget that the whole field is not that old if you look at the history of mankind.
No, and it's not that old even with respect to the history of medicine. I mean, the first anesthesia department didn't exist until really about 1960. So it's not, I mean, in an organized fashion. Anesthesia started as an offshoot of surgery, and it didn't really come into its own until much later. But at this point, the growth in out-of-OR services for patients is absolutely exponential. So the need for anesthesiology services has expanded just like that. Right. And so we are everywhere now in ways that we really weren't before.
You know, this brings me to what I had meant to ask when you were talking about your official job description. But it sounds to me, as you describe the things that the anesthesiologist has to do, as though once a procedure is decided on that includes anesthesia, or includes anesthesiologist services, you become the advocate for the patient. This is an important point if it's true.
It's true. He doesn't believe me because I'm his daughter, but it's absolutely true. It's true because our job is to sort of ease the transition into the procedure and out of it. So for example, when a cardiologist looks at your echocardiogram and says, you have a stenotic aortic valve, we should fix it, and we should fix it in the cath lab. Then they call me and say, can you look at this guy and see if we can do it this way? And then I will look at the cardiology information, the pulmonary information, the lung stuff, everything about you. And I will make my recommendation, and I will talk to you about what kind of anesthesia we're going to do. And then I will meet you before the case. I will put you off to sleep. I will be there for the whole case. I will wake you up. I will take you to the recovery room, and then I or one of my colleagues will watch you until you're ready to leave. So it's a whole process.
Okay. So we come right back to what I said at the beginning. You are our person of TLC.
Yes.
Tender, loving care.
Correct.
Before,
during and
after.
Yes.
And if I ever have to have such, I'm coming right to your department.
No problem.
Wonderful to have you, Wendy, to talk with us about your field. As I said, it has been so illuminating to discover the new things that have come up, to discover the importance of what you do in this particular field. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today in this series of Talking with the Doctor. We have other episodes that you will be able to see with people from other fields of medicine. We are very happy to have had you today, and we hope to see you again.